Welcome back to This is Thailand. Today's story belongs to a man named Murray. He's 63 years old from Alberta, Canada, Fort McMurray by way of a small town outside Red Deer, and he spent 31 years working on drilling rigs. Derrick hand, then driller. 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, minus 40 in the winter, the kind of work that wears a man down slowly and then all at once. He came to Thailand a widower with more money in the bank than he'd ever had in his life, and absolutely no plan for a single dollar of it. What happened over the next 3 years cost him a great deal more than money. And here's the part that makes this one different from most of the stories we tell on this channel. Murray will tell you, to this day, that none of it was fake. Not the woman, not the family, not the feeling. He's had a long time to reconsider that position, and he hasn't budged. We'll let you decide. This one's going to sit with you for a while, especially if you're a man over 50 who's ever wondered why a woman in her 30s would look twice at you. Murray wondered the same thing. He came up with an answer. It took him 3 years and a very long drive back from Iceland to find out he'd got it wrong. And wrong in a way he never saw coming. Here's his story in his own words. I worked the patch 31 years. That's the short version. Started at Nisku when I was 22, hauling for a service outfit, then got on a rig crew because the money was better and I was too dumb to be scared of it. Rainbow Lake, Fox Creek, a few winters up past Zama, where the roads only erode 4 months of the year. 2 and 2 mostly. 14 days on, 14 off, then back at it. Camp food, camp politics. A truck that never once got properly warm, not in 31 years, not one single January morning. You get a rhythm. Wake up, put your gear on, do the job, don't complain. Somebody drops something, you pick it up. Something breaks, you fix it with whatever's in the truck. That's the whole philosophy right there. I never needed a bigger one. Cheryl and I got married in '87. She worked at the school in Fort Mac, the office, 30-some years. We didn't have kids. Tried, didn't happen, and after a while we stopped talking about it, which I suppose is its own kind of conversation. She got diagnosed at 54. Parkinson's. Early onset, they call it, which is a funny way to say it showed up ahead of schedule like a delivery nobody ordered. I came off the rigs about a year after that. Didn't agonize over it, really. There was a thing that needed doing, and I was the one there to do it. Same as anything, 9 years. I'm not going to sit here and give you the whole medical rundown because nobody wants it, and I don't want it either. But I'll tell you what 9 years looks like from the inside. It looks like a pill organizer. One of those plastic ones with the little flip lids, Monday through Sunday, morning, noon, night. I filled that thing every Sunday afternoon for 9 years. I could do it watching the Oilers game without looking down. It looks like the drive to Edmonton, 4.5 hours each way, and you leave at 4 in the morning so you make a 9 o'clock at the U of A, and then you sit in a waiting room and they tell you what they told you last time, and you drive her home and she sleeps most of the way, and you stop at the Thames in Wandering River because that's what you do. It looks like learning how to lift a person. Properly, I mean. There's a technique. And near the end, it looks like some nights she'd wake up and not know who I was. She'd be polite about it. That's what got me. She'd be so polite to me, this stranger in her bedroom, and she'd apologize for the trouble. She passed in April. 4 years ago now. Here's the thing I've never said out loud to anybody in Canada, and I'm going to say it to a bunch of strangers on the internet, because apparently that's easier. When she died, I didn't feel anything. Not relief, not grief, nothing. I stood in that hospital room and I waited for it to hit me, and it just didn't. And that scared the hell out of me. Still does. A man ought to feel something. The funeral was well attended. Cheryl knew everybody. And for about 6 weeks, the casseroles came. People from the school, guys from the crew, and then the casseroles stopped, which is normal and fair, and I don't hold it against anyone. But that's when it got quiet. I had a paid-off house and nothing in it that needed me. You want to understand this story, you have to understand that. It wasn't loneliness exactly. I was fine alone. I'd been alone in camp half my life. It was that for 9 years I'd woken up every single morning with about 40 things that only I could do. And then one morning there were 0. and I didn't know what a man was supposed to do with a day. I sold the house that fall, got a good price. It was a decent house. Sold the acreage lot out by Anzac we'd bought back when we thought we'd build something. Took my pension as a lump sum, which everybody told me not to do, and started CPP early at 60, which is also a thing everybody tells you not to do. I did both. When it all landed, there was just under $370,000 sitting in one account with my name on it. I want to be honest about this. I checked that balance most days for about a month. Not to spend it, just to look at it like it was a typo the bank hadn't noticed yet. Guys like me don't have a number like that. My dad worked at a feedlot outside Lacombe and died owing money on a ski-doo. My brother Wayne, he's in Red Deer, sells insurance, been telling me what to do since 1971. Wayne said, buy a boat, get a place at Sylvan Lake, join something. That was his whole plan for the rest of my life. Oh, and here's a stupid thing. When the house sold and I was cleaning out, I found the pill organizer in the kitchen drawer. Still had Thursday filled. I'd loaded it up that week, and then she went in on the Wednesday and never came home. I stood there with that plastic thing in my hand for a long while, and then I put it in a box, and I don't know where that box is now. Anyway, there was a fella I worked with, Dougie McKenzie, motor hand out of Grande Prairie, retired a couple years ahead of me. He starts putting up photos on Facebook. Beach, palm trees, whole grilled fish on a plate with a bottle of Chang beside it. And he's captioned it 400 baht, which he says is about 15 bucks. Then another one, him golfing in shorts in February, somewhere called Hua Hin. I'd never thought about Thailand in my life, not once. I looked at those photos on a Tuesday night in November, with the furnace running and the wind coming off nothing for 400 kilometers. And I sat there maybe 10 minutes, and then I got the laptop and booked a flight. 10 minutes, that's what I gave it. The flight was Calgary to Taipei to Bangkok, and I don't recommend it. 16 hours in the air on the long leg, and I'm 6'2" with a back that's been telling me about itself since 2004. I didn't sleep, watched 2 movies I couldn't tell you the name of, and ate something with a bun. Then Suvarnabhumi at 11 at night, and you come out those doors and the air hits you like opening an oven you forgot was on. That's the honest first impression. Not the temples, not the smiles. The heat. It got into my clothes in about 40 seconds, and it stayed there for 3 years. I took a car down to Hua Hin, about 3 hours, and I slept most of it, and I woke up when we stopped at a PTT station where a girl sold me a coffee out of a little booth, and I paid with a bill I couldn't read. First week I was useless. Jet lag going that direction is brutal. You're wide awake at 4 in the morning listening to roosters, actual roosters, in a town with a Hilton in it, and then by 2 in the afternoon you're done. I stayed at a hotel on Pechkasem for 3 weeks while I figured out where I wanted to be. Ended up renting a condo up near Khao Takiab, 1 bedroom, 14,000 baht a month, which is about 550 Canadian. In Fort Mac, that wouldn't get you a parking stall. Now here's a thing I want to say clearly, because it matters to how the rest of this went. I did my homework. I'd read the forums. All of them. Thai Visa, the Reddit ones, the YouTube fellas with the sunglasses telling you how they lost their house. I read about bar fines and lady drinks, and the sick buffalo and the boyfriend back in the village. I knew the whole catalog before I ever got on the plane. And that's exactly why I picked Hua Hin instead of Pattaya, and why I never once in 3 years set foot on Walking Street. Not once. I'm not being pious about it, that's just not what I came for. Hua Hin's a quiet town. It's where Thai families go for the weekend. There's a night market on Dechanuchit that sells more grilled squid than beer. There's a golf course up by the hills where I could play 18 for about 1,000 baht. And there's a beach where nobody bothers you. Old town, palace up the road, monkeys on the hill at the temple. It's boring. I picked it on purpose because I thought boring was armor. That was my whole security system, by the way. Avoid Pattaya. Don't go in bars. That was it. 31 years of running safety checks on a rig floor, and that's the risk assessment I brought. Anyway, the first month was good, genuinely good, and I don't want to skip past that because it was the first stretch of time since Cheryl got sick where I woke up and thought, all right, this is fine. I found a routine fast. Rig hands need routine. We're not good without it. Up at 6 because I couldn't sleep past it anyway. Walk down to the beach while it's still gray, and there'd be monks out in the orange robes doing their alms round, barefoot, and locals kneeling on the sidewalk with rice. Coffee at a place run by a woman who called me Lung, which I found out later means uncle. Golf Tuesdays and Fridays. Whole grilled fish and a big chang at a plastic table place near the fishing pier for about 400 baht, same as Dougie's photo. And I sent him a picture of it, and he sent back a thumbs up and nothing else, because Dougie's not a talker either. And the 7-Eleven. God, the 7-Eleven. There's 4 of them within a 5-minute walk, and they play the same little jingle when you go through the door, and I ended up in one nearly every day. Toasted ham and cheese, cold water, paid my electric bill there. That door chime is the sound of Thailand to me now, more than temple bells or any of that. The part that didn't work was evenings. I don't drink much. Never have, really. You can't and hold a job on a rig, not a proper one. So the whole expat social thing didn't take with me. There's a couple of bars in Hua Hin where the Farang fellas sit and talk, and I tried it twice, and it's the same conversation both times. Immigration. What immigration did to them. What the exchange rate was in 2011. One fella spent 20 minutes on his ex-wife, and I'd never met the man before. So I'd be back in the condo by 7:30 with the aircon rattling and nothing to do. And I want to be careful here, because I said in the last bit that I was fine alone, and I was in camp. But camp had a job attached to it. This didn't. This was just a nice room in a nice town where nobody needed one thing from me. The laundry place was 2 doors down from my building. Little shop front, roll-up metal door, 2 machines and an ironing board, and a fan that turned back and forth, and the smell of hot cotton and that Thai fabric softener that's so sweet it's almost too much. 40 baht a kilo. You drop a bag off in the morning, you get it back folded in the evening, and after 9 years of doing Cheryl's laundry and mine both, I'll tell you that felt like a luxury. Woman behind the counter was called Knock. 34. Everybody's got a nickname here. The real names are long, and I never got hers right, so Knock. She overstarched my shirts every single time. I've got these short-sleeve button-ups I wear. Nothing fancy, and they'd come back stiff as a board. Collar like sheet metal. And of course, I didn't say anything because I don't say anything. I just kept dropping the bag off and taking the cardboard shirts home. Took her about 3 weeks to catch me. She's watching me sort of fight my way into one of these things. I'd stopped in to get change. And she goes, "Why you never tell me?" And I said something like, "Oh, it's fine. No trouble." And she laughed at me. Properly laughed, hand over her mouth, and she said, "Canada man say sorry for everything except the thing he is really sad about." I've thought about that line a lot since. She wasn't being deep, she was ripping on me, but she got me square between the eyes with it, and she didn't even know it. After that, it was a joke between us. I'd come in and she'd hold up the starch bottle and raise her eyebrows, and I'd say, "Give it everything. Small stuff. 2-3 minutes a day." The rest of it came out in pieces over weeks, never all at once, and never like she was presenting a case. She was from Roy Et, up in Isan, and she said it the way you'd say you're from Rocky Mountain House. Bit apologetic, bit not. Eldest of 4, divorced, and she told me that early and flat, no story attached to it. Just here is a fact about me. Had a daughter called Fawn, 9 years old, living up in the village with Knock's mother because school's cheaper there and the work's here. She showed me a photo of the kid on her phone. Girl in a school uniform with her hair in the 2 braids they all wear, squinting. And that was it. That's all it was for a long while. I dropped off laundry. She wrecked my shirts. We talked for 2 minutes. It was 6 weeks before we ate a meal together. 6 weeks. I've told that to people back home, and they don't see why it matters. It mattered because nothing was being sold to me. That's what I thought anyway. The first meal was nothing. I want to be clear about that because people hear Thailand and they picture something else. It was a cow tom place on a side street off Nepkahart, 4 tables, fluorescent tube on the ceiling, a big pot of rice soup going. She got off at 8 and I happened to be walking past and she said, "Have you eat yet?" which I learned is just how Thai people say hello. And I said no. So we ate rice soup and she asked me what a derrick was, and I tried to explain a drilling rig to a woman from a rice farming village in Royette using a napkin and a spoon. That was the first one. Then a couple more. Then one Sunday she took me up to Wat Hoi Mongkol on her motorbike, this giant statue of the monk fella, Luang Por Thuad, sitting up on the hill about 15 kilometers out of town, 63 years old on the back of a Honda Click with a woman half my size driving. Cheryl would have died laughing. She'd have taken a picture. Nock bought the flowers and the incense and showed me how to do it. 3 sticks. Neil, don't point your feet at the Buddha. That's the big one. Gold leaf on the statue. She didn't make a production of it or turn it into a tour. She just did her thing and let me follow along. And afterward, we got som tam from a stall in the parking lot that was so hot I couldn't feel my mouth. And she thought that was the funniest thing that had ever happened. It went slow. She started staying over sometime around the 4th month, and even that took a while. Now, here's where I have to tell you what I was thinking, and I'd ask you not to be too hard on me, though you can be if you want. I had a list, not written down, but a list. From all those forums, bar girl or not, she wasn't. She'd never worked a bar in her life. She'd done laundry and before that, a Tesco Lotus in Khon Kaen. Does she have a job? Yes, 6 days a week, and the ironing burns on her forearms to prove it. Is she honest about her past? She told me about the ex-husband inside the 1st month. No drama, no story, just he drinks and we finished. Does she have a kid she's hiding? No, she showed me Fawn's photo before I ever bought her a coffee. Does she ask for money? No, she did not. 2 months I offered. First time was Fawn's school fees, some uniform and books thing. She mentioned it in passing the way you'd mention the price of gas. And I said, let me get that. And she said, no. Second time I pushed a bit and she got short with me. Actually short, first time I'd seen it. Said she can do it herself. So I ran my checklist and everything came back green and I filed it and I quit thinking about it. That was the mistake. Not the money, that came later and I'll get to it. The mistake was right there in month 5. Sitting in a plastic chair, deciding I'd assess the situation. 31 years I did pre-tour inspections. You walk the rig, you check the guy lines, the BOP, the escape line, you sign the sheet. And the thing about a checklist is it only catches what's on the checklist. There were about 400 things going on in Nock's life that weren't on my list because I didn't know they existed. I didn't know what an eldest daughter is in Izan. I didn't know what her mother expected of her, or what the neighbors expected of her, or what she'd already been carrying since she was about 19. None of that was on my sheet, so I signed off. I thought no red flags meant I understood it. It doesn't. It just means you can't see anything. Anyway, month 6 or thereabouts, the laundry cut her hours. Low season, and the woman who owned it had a niece who needed work, and that's just how it goes. Nock went from 6 days to 3. She didn't tell me. I found out because I dropped a bag on a Tuesday, and she wasn't there, and the niece was, and it took me 2 more visits to get it out of her. And when she did tell me, she wouldn't look at me. Sat there staring at the fan going back and forth. I thought she was worried about rent. She wasn't, particularly. I've had a long time to think about this one. It was shame. Not the money, the being cut. Everybody on that street knew. The woman at the noodle place knew. The fellow with the motorbike taxi stand knew. In Canada, you lose shifts and you complain about it at the pub. There it's a public thing. It lands on you in front of everybody. And there's a word for that, face. And I'd read about it, and I did not understand one single thing about it until I watched a grown woman refuse to look at me over a laundry job worth $400 a month. So I offered her 20,000 baht a month. That's about 780 Canadian. I want to be precise about how I did it, because the way you frame a thing to yourself matters. I didn't say, let me take care of you. I said, look, I'm sitting here doing nothing. You're running yourself into the ground for peanuts. Take the money and quit and spend time with your kid. I made it practical. I made it a problem with a solution. That's my whole language. That's the only way I know how to say anything. She cried. Not big. Just sat there with her hand over her eyes for a bit. And then she said, I don't want you to think I am that kind of girl. And I said, no, No, it's not like that. But here's the thing that stuck with me later. I didn't actually know what kind of girl I thought she was. I'd been so busy checking that she wasn't the bad kind that I never once sat down and worked out what she actually was, who her people were, what she owed them, what she needed from a man in her life, which is not the same question as whether she liked me. I never asked. I want that on the record. She didn't hide it. I never asked. And I'll be honest about the other half of it too, since we're here. That 20,000 baht bought me something. It bought me a reason to be up in the morning. It bought me a task. For the first time since I put Cheryl's pills in that plastic box for the last time, there was a thing on this earth that ran better because I was in it. I'd have paid a lot more than 20,000 baht for that. I did eventually. The month after, it's a Sunday. We're on the beach at Khao Takiab and there's a dog asleep under a longtail boat, and she says her mother's been asking about me. Wants to see my face. Wants to feed me. She said Roy like she was warning me. It's not nice like here. It's very not nice. I said, when do we go? We went up in November, 11 hours in a van from the Hua Hin bus station, with a stop at some place near Saraburi, where I ate a bag of something and couldn't identify a single ingredient in it. You come out of Bangkok's orbit and the country changes. Flat. Really flat. Rice paddy out both windows for hours, and this time of year, it's cut and burnt in patches, so there's smoke sitting low over everything, and the sky goes a color I can only describe as tired. Every so often, a gold temple roof coming up out of nothing like somebody dropped it there. Power lines running along the road with about 14 more cables on them than there ought to be. Royet town, then another 40 minutes out to the village. Concrete block houses, tin roofs, a couple of the newer ones with those blue-tinted windows. Dog asleep under a pickup. Spirit house out front of every place, some of them with a red Fanta and a straw sitting in front of them, which I asked about later and got an answer I only half understood. The heat's different up there. Dry. Dust in your teeth. I told myself I was ready for it because I'd been in bush camps. I'd been in Zama in March when there's nothing but mud and diesel and nowhere to go. That's not the same thing. In camp, everybody's a stranger and nobody's watching you. In that village, I was the event. Neighbors came, not to talk to me. I couldn't talk to them. Just to come and stand and have a look at the farang and say something to Nock's mother that made her laugh. Kids came right up. One little fella touched the hair on my forearm and ran off screaming, and the whole yard thought that was tremendous. They fed me until I was in physical distress. Sticky rice in the little woven baskets, som tam that would take the paint off a truck, larb moo, grilled chicken, and a fish that came off a charcoal grill in the yard with the eyes still in it. And every time I stopped eating, somebody put something else in front of me. Nock's mother kept saying gin, gin, which means eat, and I ate. They sat me in the good chair. The only good chair. Everybody else was on mats on the floor, and I'm up on this plastic wicker throne like the mayor. And I didn't understand at the time that that meant something. Older, male, foreign, all three. I just thought it was a nice chair. May Samjai, that's Nock's mother. 68, about 4'11", hands like a fella who's worked a shovel her whole life, because she has. She came at me the second I got out of the van, took both my hands in hers and started crying. I want to try to say this properly, and I probably won't. I hadn't been touched with any kindness in a long time. There's the sick kind of touching, which I did plenty of. The lifting, the turning, the getting somebody to a bathroom at 3 a.m. That's not the same. This little woman I'd never met in my life had hold of both my hands and was crying and saying thank you in the only English she had. And I stood there in a dirt yard in Roya province, and I could not get a word out. Not one. I'm not going to pretend I've got that figured out even now. Fawn was there. 9, hair in the 2 braids, school uniform even though it was a Saturday, because I think somebody put her in it. She hid behind her grandmother for the first day, and by the second day she was showing me a drawing she'd done, and by the third day she decided my knees were a place to sit. She called me Lung, uncle. And there was B, Nock's younger brother, mid-20s, mechanic of a sort, worked on bikes out of a shed. He weighed me properly, said the right things, got me a beer. Very polite. Never once looked me in the face. Whole 4 days I clocked it and I filed it under shy. Kid's shy, doesn't have English, doesn't know what to make of the old white fella in his mother's yard. That's what I told myself. It was not shy. The kidney thing came up on the 3rd day, and it did not come up the way you'd think. Knock told me in the truck on the way to the market, sort of sideways in the middle of a sentence about something else. Her mother's kidneys were going. She'd been going to the government hospital in Royette, and the wait was what it was. And there was a private place in Concane, and the number for a course of treatment, plus the scans, plus the getting her there and back was 180,000 baht. About 7,200 Canadian. And then she stopped talking about it. Didn't ask. Changed the subject to a cousin's wedding. I paid it that afternoon. Transferred it from the Bangkok bank account on my phone sitting on a plastic stool outside a shop that sold engine oil and lottery tickets. Took about 4 minutes. And I'll tell you what I felt. Because it wasn't generosity and it wasn't love. And I've had a lot of time to get honest about it. Relief. Here was a problem with a solution. A thing that was broken and a number that fixed it. 9 years I'd been trying to fix a woman with a disease that does not get fixed. And every single day I lost that fight a little more. And here was May Samjai's kidneys. And here was 180,000 baht. And the thing just went away. I made it go away. You can't buy that feeling in Canada. There's nothing broken in Canada that I'm allowed to fix. That's the whole story, really. Everything after that is just bigger numbers. We went back to Hua Hin and life carried on, and the money started moving in a quiet, regular way that I never once sat down and added up. Fawn's school fees, which turned out to include uniform, books, bus, a computer thing. Then Knock's niece, her older sister's girl, doing a vocational course in Roy Et Town, 6,000 a month. Then Songkran came around in April, and there's a thing you do for your elders, water on the hands, and there's also a thing you do with an envelope, and I did both. And here's the part one need people to understand, because everybody wants this to be a scam, and it wasn't that simple. She was the eldest daughter. That is a job in Isan. It is not a feeling, it's a job, and she'd had it since she was about 19, and working that Tesco Lotus in Concane, and sending money home every month. The family runs on the eldest daughter. Everyone knows it, nobody discusses it, and the shame of not managing it is enormous. None of that was invented for my benefit. It was true before I got there, and it'll be true after I'm gone. What I did was walk in and take the job offer. Nobody asked me to. Nobody in that family ever asked me for 1 baht directly. Not once in 3 years, not May Samjai, not B, not the sister. Everything came through Knock, and half of it came sideways in a truck on the way to the market. And I wanted it. That's the bit. I liked being the reason it all worked. 14 months in, Knock's sitting on the end of the bed in the condo with the aircon rattling, and she says, "My mother asked me when we will marry." I said yes about 4 seconds after she said it, which for me is a long deliberation. We did the engagement in the village the following March. Not a wedding. Thai people will tell you the ceremony is the thing, and the paperwork at the Ampher is just paperwork. And we never did get round to the paperwork, which turned out to matter later in ways I didn't plan for. But the ceremony was real. Monks in the morning, white string, the whole yard under a rented tarp with those plastic chairs stacked 10 deep in the back of a pickup, and a sound system playing Morlem loud enough to be heard in the next village, which is the point of the sound system. The sin sod was 300,000 baht, about 12,000 Canadian. Now, I know what half of you are thinking, because I read those same forms. Bride price, buying a woman. I want to walk you through what it actually looked like, because I've thought about it a lot, and I've come out somewhere different than I went in. They laid it out on a table. Cash in a bowl, on a cloth, and gold beside it. 3 bait weight of gold, chains and a bracelet. Maybe another 60,000 baht on top. Out in the open in the middle of the yard with about 140 people standing around it. An auntie counted it out loud in front of everybody. Nobody hit a thing. That's the part that gets me. Every single dollar I ever lost in this story, I lost quietly, on a phone, sitting on a plastic stool. The one transaction everybody back home calls a scam was the only one conducted in broad daylight with the whole village as witness. And I watched what it did to May Somjai. Woman stood about 2 inches taller for the rest of the day. Her daughter had been sent home from a marriage at 26 with a kid, and everybody in that village had known it and never said a word about it to her face for 8 years. And here on this afternoon, that got answered. In public. Permanently. That's what the money was for. It wasn't for the woman, it was for the standing. I was the proudest I've been since, I don't know, since we bought the house in Fort Mac, maybe. I sat in that yard sweating through a shirt I'd let Knock pick out, and I felt like I'd done something correct. The house started in June. Land was already there. A plot behind the family place, maybe half a rye, held in May Somjai's name. And here's where I need to be very clear, because I've had people assume I got tricked on this, and I did not get tricked. I knew. A foreigner cannot own land in Thailand. Full stop. That's not buried in fine print. That's the first thing you read on any form on earth. I knew I could put it in a company structure, and I knew those structures get looked at hard now. I knew about usufructs and 30-year leases. I knew a lawyer in Hua Hin who'd have drawn one up for about 40,000 baht. I didn't do any of it. I signed nothing. Not one piece of paper with my name on it. Because these were my people now. That's the actual reason. When you're sat in that yard and the grandmother's crying and the kid calls you uncle, getting a lawyer to write up a document about who owns what feels like an insult you'd never recover from. I made a choice with my eyes open, and the choice was that the law didn't apply to us. 1.4 million baht, 56,000 Canadian, 2 bedrooms, proper bathroom, tile floors, blue-tinted windows like the good houses have, and a wall out front with a gate, concrete post and beam, block infill, tin roof, standard build up there. Then the truck, 700,000 baht, about $28,000, a used Isuzu D-Max. And the reasoning was sound. The family had nothing. The mother needed the hospital in Khon Kaen. The sister's girl needed the college run. You can't do any of that on a Honda Wave. All true. B drove it. 95% of the time, B drove it. He'd wave me and say thank you, and I'd say don't mention it, and then he'd take off with 2 of his mates in the back, and I wouldn't see it for a week. All right, the cracks. None of them look like cracks. That's what I want to get across. Nothing arrived with a bang. The house took 11 months, and it was supposed to take 6, which is nothing. That's construction. I've watched a 5-week well site build take 4 months in Alberta. Money went out in tranches to a builder who was a cousin of somebody, and the invoices were handwritten, and I couldn't read them anyway. But I could read the finish. Grout lines that wandered, a door that didn't shut on the frame, a bathroom fan that wasn't wired to anything. I spent 31 years around men who build things, and I knew that house had cost less than 1.4 million to put up. Knew it standing right there in the doorway. And I didn't say a word because the alternative was accusing somebody's cousin of skimming in front of the whole family, and I'd learned just enough by then to know what that would do. That's the thing about face. It protects everybody, including the ones taking a piece off the top. Second one, Knock got tense about the bank account. Not about spending. She never once asked for more. But if I was on the banking app, she'd find something else to do in another room. And if I mentioned a balance out loud, she'd go quiet. And one time I was showing her something on the phone, and she reached over and turned the screen away. I read that as her being uncomfortable with how much I had. Money embarrasses her, I thought. That's decent of her. Third one, and this is the one I keep coming back to. 5,000 baht a month going out of her account. Same date every month to a name I didn't recognize. I saw it because I was on her phone looking at a photo of Fawn, and the transfer notification came up on the screen. I asked. First time she said it was for her aunt in Yasathon, medicine. 2-3 months later, it came up again in conversation, and she said it was for a friend, a loan she was paying back from before. Different answer. Not defensive, not caught out, just a different answer, delivered exactly as easy as the first one, and I let it go. I've been asked why, a lot, mostly by my brother Wayne, who is not a subtle man. Here's the honest answer. It was 5,000 baht, $195. I was moving 50 times that in a bad month. The amount was so small that pursuing it would have made me look like a man who counts. And I did not want to be that man in that house. And I especially did not want to find out what asking a third time would cost me. That's the arithmetic. Not that I couldn't afford to ask, that I couldn't afford the answer. Add it up if you like. I finally did, on a legal pad, much later. 3.9 million baht across 31 months. Roughly 155,000 Canadian. Then in October, we all went up for the housewarming, and B got into it with his mother about whose name was on the land title, and he'd been at the Hong Thong since about 2 in the afternoon. And halfway through the argument, he stopped and turned round and looked straight at me. First time in 3 years, he said it in English. That's what I keep coming back to. 3 years of B not looking at me, 3 years of I get you beer, lung, and when it finally came out of him, it came out in English good enough that he must have been carrying it around a long time. The yard's got about 40 people in it. Housewarming, so there'd been monks in the morning, and food since 10, and the sound system going. And by 4 in the afternoon, the older ones were on the mats, and the young fellows were round the back of the new house with a bottle of Hong Thong and a bucket of ice. B had been at that bucket since about 2. The fight was with his mother, and it was about the land title, and I couldn't follow a word of it. A San dialect, fast, everybody's voice up. Something about whose name goes where when she's gone. Ordinary family stuff. Every family on earth has that fight. Then he stopped mid-sentence and turned round and looked straight at me and said, "And I'm giving you this the way I remember it, which may not be exact." He said, "You know Volker pay for this land? Long time. Before you. And my sister still send money every month to her husband mother. 5,000 every month. You don't know that." Then somebody grabbed his arm and it went back to Thai, and it was over in about 15 seconds. 15 seconds, 3 years. And here's what I felt. Nothing. Same nothing as the hospital room in Fort Mac. I stood there in a yard I'd paid for holding a plastic cup of orange Fanta, and I waited for something to arrive and it didn't. Somebody put another plate of larb in front of me. I ate some of it. I drove back to Hua Hin 2 days later. 11 hours. Didn't put the radio on. Now, there was no big scene after that. No, that's what a story wants. There wasn't one. What there was about 6 weeks of me sitting in that condo with the aircon rattling, doing what I do, which is going through the paperwork. I'd kept everything. 31 years of tickets and tour sheets does that to a man. Every transfer, every screenshot, the bank app going back to the first 20,000 baht. I sat there with a legal pad and a calculator, and I laid it out month by month like a job cost. And no one thing on that page was a crime, but the shape of it. That's what got me. The pattern. Every serious request landed in a specific window. 2-3 weeks after I'd said something out loud about the money, about the house sale, about the pension, about what I had. Not the same week, never the same week. And every crisis resolved completely the moment the transfer cleared. The kidneys, the college fees, the truck. Nothing ever came back for a second round. Nothing ever escalated. Nothing ever got messy. Clean. Professional almost, except I don't think that's the word either. That's not a scam. A scam has a payoff and an exit. This had neither. What this was a family that had done this before and knew the rhythm of it. I went back up in January, told Knock I was going to see Fawn, which was true. 2 days I sat around that village asking questions with a translation app, and I want you to understand, nobody hid anything from me. Nobody looked shifty. The auntie at the shop that sells engine oil told me about Volker like she was telling me about the weather. German fella. Big. Came around 6-7 years back, stayed maybe 2 years, cleared the plot, put in the septic and the retaining wall and the power pole. Went home. Everyone knew. Everyone had always known. There'd been a fella before Volker too, apparently, but that one only lasted a season. They didn't think it was a secret. That's what I couldn't get my head around for a long while. It wasn't a secret because in their heads it wasn't a betrayal. It was just what had happened previously. It was history, like a flood year or a bad harvest. Nobody sits you down and tells you about the flood of 2011 either. I hadn't been robbed. I'd been the third fella to carry that family a bit further up the hill, and I'd carried them further than the other two. And everybody in that village would have told me so if I'd ever once asked. I never asked. I've said that before in this story, and I'll say it again because it's the whole thing. The confrontation was in the condo, end of January, and it went nothing like I'd planned it in the truck on the way back. I laid it out flat. Volker, the 5,000, the dates. I didn't raise my voice. I've never raised my voice at a woman in my life, and I wasn't going to start at 63. She didn't deny one word of it. Not one. She got angry. Properly angry. Angrier than I've ever seen her, and it wasn't a guilty anger either. She was insulted. She stood in that kitchen and she said, "You think I don't love you? You think because I need you, I don't love you?" And she said something like, "In my country, a man take care of family. That is love. That is not different thing. What you want me to say? You want me say I love you and I don't need anything from you? That is a lie. Nobody live like that." And then the part one still can't get past. She said, "Why you make me choose?" I stood there with the legal pad in my hand and I didn't have one word for her. Not one. I'd spent 9 years not having words and 3 years not asking questions. And now she was standing there being more honest with me in 10 minutes than I'd been with myself the entire time I'd been in the country. Because she was right, wasn't she? I'd never once said out loud what I actually wanted. Not to her, not to Wayne, not to Cheryl's photograph on the shelf. I'd let everybody think I was a generous man who'd fallen in love with a Thai woman, when what I actually was a man who'd found a family that needed lifting and would have paid anything to keep the lifting going. I didn't tell her that either. Of course I didn't. She cried a bit at the end, and I think that was real, and I'll never know. And I've made my peace with never knowing. I didn't book a flight to Calgary. I want to be clear about that because everybody expects that bit, and it didn't happen. I got a room in a little place off Soy 88 across town. Monthly rate, 6,000 baht, kettle and a fan, and a window facing a wall. Sat on the end of that bed the first night with a toasted ham and cheese from the 7-Eleven going cold on my knee. It's been 8 months since that night with the sandwich. I'm not in the room off Soy 88 anymore. I'm in the condo. My condo, and I mean that in the legal sense, which is the only sense that counts in this country. I bought it in the second year, 2.4 million baht, about 96,000 Canadian, 1 bedroom in a low-rise up the north end near Khao Takiab. Foreign quota, chenode in my name at the land office, with my passport photocopied about 9 times. Foreigners can't own land in Thailand. Foreigners can own a condominium unit. That's not a loophole. That's just the law, and it's about the only piece of advice off those forms I actually put into practice. I want to be honest about why I did it, because it wasn't wisdom. It was that a condo is a building, and a building is a thing you can inspect. I understood it. I could stand in it and knock on the walls. The land in Royet I could not stand on in any way that mattered, and I knew that. And I went ahead anyway. And there's your whole man in one paragraph. So, the accounting. I'll do it the way I'd write up an incident report, because that's how I think, and I'm too old to learn another way. Gone. 3.9 million baht to the family across 31 months. Roughly 155,000 Canadian. The house, the truck, the sinsod, the gold, the treatment, the school fees, the allowance, Songkran. All of it in Royet. None of it in my name, none of it coming back. Also gone. 3 years, though I'd argue with anyone who calls those wasted. Some of them were the best I've had. Also gone. Whatever Wayne thought of me, he's had a lot to say. Some of it's fair. Kept the condo. About $95,000 in the bank, split between Bangkok Bank and back home. 800,000 baht of that parked in the Thai account. Seasoned 3 months because that's the retirement extension requirement. And I do that every year now, like a fella changing the oil. Kept my visa, my health, my hair, most of my sense of humor. And here's the one everybody asks about. We never registered. Ceremony in the yard, monks, white string, 140 people. And we never went to the ampher, never filed a thing. So there's no divorce because there was never a marriage, not legally. I've had 2 different expats tell me I dodged a bullet there, and they're not wrong. But I want to be straight with you about it. That wasn't planning. That was 2 people who kept meaning to get round to it. I got saved by procrastination. Put that on my headstone. She calls on Sundays. I know how that lands. I've watched people's faces when I say it. But she does. Line. Sunday evenings, usually about 7, and it's 10 minutes of nothing. Fawn's school, the mother's blood pressure, what I've eaten. I ask her what she's eaten, then we hang up. I send 8,000 baht a month for Fawn, $310. Fixed number, fixed date, doesn't move for Songkran, doesn't move for anything, and if the mother's kidneys go again, the answer is no. And I know exactly what that sounds like from the outside. I know a lot of men say I've got it under control now. What I'd say is only this. I set the number, I said it out loud, and the reason I send it is that a 9-year-old called me uncle for 3 years, and none of this was her doing. That's it. That's the whole reasoning, and you can weigh it however you like. Now the part 1 actually want to say, because I don't think it's the part people expect. 1, never learned Thai. 3 years. I had maybe 40 words. Hello. Thank you. Delicious. How much? Not spicy. Turn left. That's it. And I've come to think that was the real failure. Bigger than any transfer on that legal pad. Because I couldn't ask anybody anything. I couldn't talk to Mei Sum Jai without her daughter in the middle. I couldn't talk to B at all. Every single thing I knew about that family for 3 years came through one person, and I never once thought that was a problem, because I never once wanted it to be. That's the thing I'd go back and fix. Not the money went where money goes. And the other one, I never asked what they needed before I decided to be the one who provided it. Not once. I walked into that yard in Royette and I looked around and I appointed myself, same as I'd walk onto a lease and start solving. Nobody in that family ever asked me for a single baht directly, not one. It all came through knock, sideways in a truck, on the way to the market. And I read that as delicacy, and maybe it was, and maybe it was also just how you handle a man who's already reaching for his phone. Everybody warned me about bar girls. Every forum, every video, every fella on a stool in Hua Hin. Nobody warned me about a woman with a job and a kid and burns on her forearms and a mother who cried holding my hands. There's no threat about that. There's no checklist for that. So, the title question. Why do women in their 30s chase men over 50 out here? It's not mystery. It's not our conversation, God knows. And I don't think it's simply money either, because plenty of men out here have money and get nowhere. It's stability. And stability isn't a bank balance. Stability is a man who will carry a load for other people and keep carrying it. That's what she was looking at across that laundry counter. Not a wallet, a load-bearing wall. And here's my part, the part that's mine and nobody else's. I wanted the job. I'd spent 9 years being needed every single hour of every single day, and then I'd spent 4 years being needed by nobody at all. And when a family showed up that needed lifting, I climbed under it and I lifted. And I would have paid just about anything to keep lifting. I never once called it a purchase, but I know what I was buying. That's it. That's what I've got. Murray still lives in Hua Hin in a condominium that is legally entirely his own. Let's be clear about the arithmetic in this story, because it isn't the arithmetic most people assume. The sin sod was real tradition, conducted in public, and it did exactly what it exists to do. The family obligation was real too. Eldest daughters across Isayan carry their families, and that job existed long before Murray got off that van, and it exists today. Those were not the fraud, what Murray was never told about, the man before him, the payment that never stopped. That was the breach, and it was a breach of honesty, not of law. And notice what saved him. Not suspicion, not a private investigator, not a phone left unlocked, a title deed in his own name, and a piece of paperwork he and Knock never got around to filing. That's the margin between a hard lesson and a catastrophe, and it's thinner than any of us would like. If you're over 50 and you're thinking about this life, take one thing from Murray. There is a difference between being loved and being useful. Both can feel warm. Only one of them survives you saying no. Thanks for spending this time with us. Look after yourselves out there. This is Thailand.